6:23 as you drive home tonight on the Rod Arquette Show and Talk Radio 105.7 FM 570 AM. Steve Moore, chief economist with the Heritage Foundation, used to be with the Wall Street Journal editorial board, will be joining us coming up in a little bit for his weekly chat with us about the economy. Some pretty good economic news out today. We'll talk about that. But right now, I want to talk about this white paper that was released today by so-called legal scholars at the University of Utah, concluding that the state has no legal basis to demand the federal government turn over title to public lands. You read more into this and you go, no, I'm not sure if they say that. Now, of course, here in the state of Utah, I am a big fan of Utah's efforts to reclaim that federal land here in the state. But these scholars basically say there are legitimate reasons, but Utah should really think about the economic impact and if, in fact, we do have a legal right to take control of those lands. Well, leading the effort here in the state of Utah is State Representative Ken Ivory, who's joining us on our Newsmaker line tonight. Ken, how are you? Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Rod, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
What is your reaction to this so-called white paper today, Ken?
Well, it's a marketing piece masquerading as legal analysis, basically. They go to great lengths to they talk about this disclaimer clause in Utah's Enabling Act.
Mm-hmm.
But, Rod, what they don't tell you is that exact same language, those exact same terms are in the Enabling Acts of North and South Dakota and Nebraska and Louisiana and Alabama. And then they go on to say, well, somehow because it was from the Louisiana Purchase, the western states don't get their land. But guess what? Louisiana was one of the states in the Louisiana Purchase. They have that same forever disclaimed language. They were 90% federally controlled for decades. And guess what? They battled together with their neighboring states, compelled Congress to transfer their land because that language, forever disclaim, right and title, was a quitclaim deed to the federal government as trustee for the purpose of disposing of the land faster and for more money for the benefit of the states and for the benefit of the nation so that you have productive use and those on the land whose lives and livelihoods depend upon wise use of the land take care of it instead of some absentee landlord thousands of miles away. We understood that until we got to the west, and that's why you see that map that just I mean, Rod, the whole argument, you look at the map and you say, come on, is that equal? Is that fair?
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous to try to make these arguments that somehow this complete difference is somehow fair. It really is amazing.
Well, and the thing that threw me, Ken, was they can't claim that through a careful reading of that Utah Enabling Act that there is support of the notion that the federal government would give up its lands. And yet somehow the federal government changed its mind. Well, isn't that the argument we're making? Why did she change her mind and change it back to the way it should be and give us our land?
That's exactly right. Rod, you couldn't have zeroed in on that any better. What is unconstitutional about Congress going back to observing the duty it had from 1776, from 1780 into the Constitution all the way up to 1976 when they changed their policy? It wasn't until 1976 that they said, we're just going to keep this land in federal ownership. And the one I like even better, I love when they say the meaning attached to statutory terms at the time of their enactment controls, not the meaning applied more than a century later. Well, guess what? The Utah legislature, at the very time of our statehood, less than 20 years after statehood, the same people that were there at statehood said, they did a resolution, the state legislature did a resolution calling on Congress and the president to transfer title to the public lands in conformity with the terms of our Enabling Act. So using their same language, absolutely. Let's attach the meaning to the terms at the time of their enactment and not 100 years later. They certainly knew what they meant back then.
Yeah, and they also point out, they call the fact that this transfer could lead to a fiscal train wreck if the state doesn't sell the land to cover the cost of managing it. I don't see a fiscal train wreck. Do you, Ken?
No, that's just crazy. There's so many studies out there. In fact, Nevada has the most recent study on the economic impact of transferring the BLM lands to Nevada. Rod, they studied this for a year and a half, and they concluded that it would be a $1.5 billion net plus to the state and their school children and their universities and their health and human services to transfer the BLM lands to the state of Nevada so that you have more local, more efficient, more timely, responsive management of the land.
I don't follow this one argument that they make, Ken, and maybe you can explain it to me as well. But apparently agriculture had to do something with how the West was treated and why we were treated differently from the eastern states. Can you explain that one to me? Because I'm going, what, rainfall?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I'm still looking for the arid clause in the Constitution, Rob. I just was up in Alaska a couple of months ago. So Alaska, 62% federally controlled, 262 million acres federally controlled. Rod, Alaska has 1 million lakes and only 700,000 people. And yet somehow, because their land is arid, the federal government keeps it. I mean, it really is crazy.
Where do you go with this, Ken? I mean, how will you defend your efforts and the efforts of so many people against an argument like this? Is it fairly easy in your opinion?
Well, we just keep moving forward, and we've got our Commission on the Stewardship of Public Lands, and we're going through and analyzing how do we designate the multiple use and management of the lands, how do we provide for improved access, health, and productivity of the lands, the legal analyses, the kind of the governing body that would govern the lands, the economic analysis, how do we apply the net proceeds? We know we've got a $2.6 billion per pupil shortfall in education funding. How do we apply those proceeds to those types of things? The timetable for transition, this is a key point, Rod. So many people think that it would just be you flip a switch from one day to the next and all of a sudden it's state land and the federal government cuts everything off. Well, no. Do you know that Canada is already doing this right now? Just this year, the federal government in Canada is turning all the lands, resources, and water to the Northwest Territories. They already did it to the Yukon Territories, and they continue to pay for the management in the transition because they're getting better management for less money. And so those are the kinds of things in transition that you do logically. It's not this flip a switch, you can't afford it. Well, if we're paying exorbitant amounts for bad management that restricts access, diminishes health, and depresses productivity now, why don't we pay a little bit less money at the federal level in transition for more local, more responsive, better access, better health, and better productivity?
Yeah, it's called fear tactics, I think, Ken. Ken, as always, great chatting with you.
Well, thanks, Rod. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, that is State Representative Ken Ivory talking about this white paper put out by a couple of professors or legal scholars, so to speak, up at the University of Utah today, challenging Utah's public lands campaign. More coming up on the Rod Arquette Show on Talk Radio 105.7 FM, 570 AM.